Hey everybody, so this is Dark Guardsman, also known as the Queen of Missiles. So I haven't done a video in a while, and I'm completely out of practice this, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time of we don't really have music, don't really have much of an agenda, not that I ever really did. But what I want to do really quickly is just kind of at least try to get back in the swing of this, and try to start making something of videos. Now I can't promise any consistency to schedule, any consistency to getting something released or anything like that. I also would say is this doesn't mean I'm 100% back, just means I'm making an effort. So what I want to do today is kind of show some of the improvements I'm working on for ICBM. So over the last year, when I have had time, work has been kind of killing me on time and everything else. I have been trying to work on the Redmatter rewrite. The reason for the Redmatter rewrite is very, 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 very simple. It ran like shit. It wasn't like performant in a good way. Had a ton of problems, everything else. Now visually there isn't a huge amount of improvement. I have worked on the beams a little bit to try to make them slightly less obnoxious. I still want to keep them. I'm still trying to keep them color. The color is at least having some problems. I switched over to a pastel randomizer to give it at least a little more consistency on the brighter colors. And you can kind of see how this turned out. We get a little bit more pink shading here. I got to figure out how to do the gradients a little better. We're still using a modified version of the Ender Dragon's beam render. I might end up inevitably switching away from that because I have a good conception of how that works. But at the same time, there's things that are going to need improved. It does do its job pretty well because you get kind of this diamond, not diamond, I want to say pyramid type shape geometry is kind of what they're aiming for when they did the Ender Dragon one. But yeah, so that's been improved to be a little bit better. Colorization has been improved to be a little bit better. I have messed with the physics on the flying blocks a little bit. They no longer collide with things. This is a temporary thing. I do want to get the collisions back on them again because the whole idea of having collisions is as they were being picked up and as the blocks were being removed from the world, they would hit and smack into things. And not only was the ideal to eventually do damage to player, buildings, everything else, but the ideal was that they could build up and clump up in certain areas and kind of make even more of a mess of the terrain around you. For the moment, I've removed it because it helps with performance. If you don't have to worry about physics collisions, you don't have to worry about TPS drop or FPS drop as bad. Now, of course, I'm sitting on a pretty nice workstation, so when I'm saying something performs well, when you take it to, say, a more of a standardized server or more of a standardized client, there's a possibility it's not going to be that great. But in comparison, the Redmatter originally wasn't that great to start with, so it's going to be better, and probably noticeably better. So we get the physics on that. I have completely reworked the logic. So not only does the Redmatter behave like an entity now, which the whole reason for doing that is to give it more possibility and flexibility in designs and usage, including allowing it to be manipulated by other mods. So a lot of other mods had some difficulty interacting with the Redmatters, pushing them around, killing them, doing stuff like that, because the way the Redmatter was actually built is there was a blast instance that sat into the data structure of the world that then spawned the Redmatter entity, and the Redmatter entity just acted as a render object. It didn't actually function, it didn't do anything. It just sat there and just acted as a placeholder, so that way visually it was there. Now I've gone with the other direction on that one, where we do actually have an entity. It does have a render still and everything, obviously, but the entity actually triggers a logic class. The logic class is attached directly to the entity, so when you kill the entity, it's gone, it's dead, it disappears. And when the missile or warhead or whatever hits or impacts and wherever you set the blocks off or carts off, it just spawns this entity, which means there's a lot more flexibility. It means server owners, mod pack makers, whatever, can now do more with this. You can spawn this entity directly, manipulate it. You can control the starting initial size of it, because the Redmatter can grow now. It can change size, which was something we did originally in one of the older versions, but it wasn't kind of realized properly. But yeah, you can make these grow, so you can set a min-max size on them. So if a server owner wants to spawn like a whole bunch and say, okay, the farthest you can grow is like 5 meters in size, that is a possibility, and then you can start it with an initial size really, really, really small. Of course, you will have to use MBT to get it spawned that way, but it will work. It will packet sync. It will do all the things it's supposed to do. But yeah, back to the logic and stuff. So the original logic of how this worked. So very originally when Calclavi built this, because me and him kind of worked on this model, but he built a lot of the original logic, and I just kind of made things function and made sure they didn't break. He decided to use a kind of a for each loop that basically looped through I want to say tangent and theta, so basically two angles. So it would go angle horizontal, and then as it completed its horizontal angle, it would then rotate more or less the pitch, so that way it would go through a loop again around the edge. And it would do this, it would rotate through, and it would ray trace each of those rotations, and it would approximate, as best as it could, a spherical ray trace to try to work. It's the same way vanilla Minecraft TNT works, except vanilla Minecraft TNT normalizes to be a box style shape. And they do a whole bunch of fudging with the numbers to make it work well. If you've seen previous ones on my stream, although I probably make a YouTube video to explain exactly how this math works, is I've actually gone through the effort to make a visualization software to actually show how the math works on TNT to understand better how we can build ICBM-based explosives. But it effectively, it tried to do the best it could. The problem with this ended up with a really nasty looking ray trace that then had to be corrected and modified. Calclavia got around this by just making the ray trace really far away and then clipping the max boundaries down, so that way you got a really nice one. The issue is that you ended up ray tracing through the same block a few thousand times in order to get to work, which made the performance really horrible, and it meant that unless you really threaded it and did a whole bunch of other shenanigans with it, you didn't get good results. Now we tried to improve this in one of the versions that were released like back in 2019 or something like that, by switching over to a shell-based one, which was closer to how the antimatter behaves. The antimatter actually behaves on its own for each loop that is actually just XYZ, and it just collects all the blocks and deletes them. It's about as fast as you possibly can go for getting rid of blocks out of Minecraft. And it's the reason why when that one's running on a thread, it runs really fast, really smooth, dumps into the main world, and just gets rid of blocks. It's actually really, really nice. But we switched over to shell version of that. The shell version basically worked is that we started off at 0 size, and we would go 1 block out, and then we would detect all the blocks with 1 block out, and we would get rid of them. And then we would go 2 blocks out and detect all those and get rid of them, and so on. We would keep iterating out until we cleared all the blocks. Now this kind of worked. It had a lot of problems where we weren't quite catching all the blocks. Say if you're manipulating the world or other things were going on around it, it would miss a few blocks, result in floating blocks sitting around. It also had some performance issues and just functionality problems. Didn't overall work, and then we tried a few other different methods, didn't work. So what I ended up doing here on a series of live streams over on Twitch is working through how to get the best results, how to get the best calculations, how to get the best performance, and we did a whole bunch of visualization software. What we ended up figuring out is I could calculate the edge blocks, figure out where is the edge of my boundary, and ray trace directly towards those, and figure out how to do that in such a precise way where I minimized the number of ray traces I needed, maximized the amount of blocks I was collecting, so that way we didn't have any gaps or didn't have any misses, and also ensure that, you know, performance was doing what we expected it to do. And we ended up with a pretty nice ray trace, and this one works similar to the shell one. It'll go out in size, but it doesn't go out in size in the sense of the shell one. The shell one basically would start off on 0, go to 100, and then would come back to 0 and re-loop back through over and over again. This one doesn't need to do that. It just needs to go to the size the current Redmatter is. So if we're a 5 meter size Redmatter and our block collection range is 25 meters, we need to find the ray traces on the edge of 25 and ray trace towards those blocks, and any block we hit in between, we collect up and pull and stuff like that. And that's the reason why you see stuff like this. This thing is actively trying to expand and find more and more blocks, and it does it one layer at a time. And the reason it does it one layer at a time is, one, it's got to figure out where it's going to ray trace to start with. So if you start off with a smaller size and you work your way up, you're going to have fewer ray traces until you get up to your actual size. So if this maximum size was 50 and it was trying to grow towards 50 but didn't quite have enough blocks, and say it only managed to get enough blocks to grow to like 10 meters in size, and it only could detect out to a certain range, well, you don't want to detect out to its maximum size possible. You want to start off with a smaller size, and especially as it's growing forward, but especially as well, which I'm saying that word especially too much times, but when you start off first deploying it, you know for sure you're probably going to have blocks within the first couple meters. So there's no point ray tracing to the maximum if the first few are going to be that way. And particularly this works well with how I actually handle the ray traces. As soon as we ray trace to a block, I remove that from the position set and actually dump it out of the position set, so that way once we go through all of the positions, we dump that data set, start with a brand new fresh data set of new ray trace positions, and I can randomize shuffle those and create a feathering effect on the edge, so you don't end up always with these perfect circles. Instead you end up with this mess of area down here. Anyways, let me go ahead and kill this one off. ICBM lag command does work on these. If you ever find it doesn't, let me know and I'll just fix it, because it's very important that that command does work for the larger servers that do have a lot of problems. There's actually a server owner that I know that actually has a command block at his spawn point that just fires off ICBM lag every like 10 minutes. to kill off all the missiles people are spawning and everything else, because they have way too many players. And ICBM, although we build it for PvP servers and try to keep that in mind, we never designed it for larger scale servers, so it was always meant to be thought of as a server where you might only have 10 people shooting missiles at a time. He unfortunately was running into problems where we were having like about 100 to 200 Redmatter detonations at a time, and yeah, you just can't do much with that. So we're going to place one over here, and I'm going to show you how it kind of works now. When you do place these are going to start off at a much smaller size. Their default starting size is 2 meters, and as they consume blocks, they'll continue to grow up into their maximum size. You see it'll scale up, it'll start to grow. The animation's a bit slow on it. The beams do take the sweet time to start spawning out of it, but you'll see it'll start picking up blocks, and if you kind of can catch it, it's really hard to notice, but it is actually randomly grabbing those blocks around there. Now, it can be a bit slow because it has to ray trace the complete shell around it, which does include air blocks. I have not thought of a good way to solve that to get rid of the air block problem, because you do run into the issue that what if something introduces blocks above it? You can't just completely ignore it, though there is workarounds for that. Some of the other changes as well, I actually have made it when it does run into water blocks, it is actually doing real-time updates on them. It used to be where we would just replace the block and tell it do not trigger block updates, and this would cause flows of water problems. To get around that of being able to still update it, I actually am starting to place ice blocks in places, so if it picks up a water source, it'll find all water source blocks around that and convert them to ice, so you'll have a 1 meter range where you'll start to see ice blocks pop up, and that just allows it to start picking up water blocks and getting rid of them. Unfortunately, due to how Minecraft behaves with water physics, you still get this weirdness with the water flow problem down here, so you'll still see issues with that. But at least now, if you drop it the right matter in the ocean, it will start to suck up water. It just won't be the quickest about it. But it does work. It's really performant. Like, we aren't really getting like latency issues. Now I've got, theoretically mine is v-syncing, so we are getting 60 FPS. I have not seen it dip down. I don't want to max out my computer's frame rate because this graphics card down here, I don't know if you guys can hear it through my microphone, it's already revving up already because we're running recording software and Minecraft and other things in the background. But like if you let VSync go out of control, like actually not have VSync on, this thing will start to skyrocket. But yeah, it doesn't dip down. We're not getting a huge amount of updates. Like, it is definitely there. And if I go to something and do like Forge TPS, I think is what the command is, we're maintaining 20 TPS. Now on a server, obviously this is probably going to be different because the computer I'm running actually has an okay graphics card. It's like an i7 of some kind, and I've got it maximized for a single core performance. So my experience is going to be different than what you do on a server, but compared to the old version, which I really should collect some samples of performance difference between the old and the new version just to show the difference, it is significantly better. Like, we used to not be able to do stuff like this. Even on my own personal computer would lag watching something like that happen. And I really haven't changed my computer in the last like 3 years. But yeah, this is doing much better. Beyond this right here, we haven't had a huge amount of improvements. We have had a few pull requests fixing certain bugs. We have had GHXX actually go through and do some stuff, and I am actively working on getting a release out there, which will be the first release in about a year. Our last release was March of 2020. Which is almost a year now. I never really liked the fact that we're so far behind on releases, but at the same time, you know, work is a pain, and I did technically quit modding for a little bit. And in, I guess, half back here, I've yet to figure that one out. But we'll be working on this and getting it through. It's still for Minecraft 1.12, if you, I guess you can't see in the top corner because I'm recording the full frame. But it is for an older version of the game. We have no plans currently to go forward with versions. I do want to try to get on newer versions. I really do want to try to catch up, but right now with how things stand, I get about usually less than 10 hours a month to work on stuff, because when I'm done with work every day, I'm burnt out, because I usually do about a 9 to 10 hour day every day, Monday through Friday, and usually even get stuck working weekends sometimes. And then when I'm not working, I'm usually taking care of everything else in the household. Which turns out to be really time consuming. Nobody would thought that you get like a house with people and it takes upkeep. But this will try to move forward, and once we get things stable on 1.12, I will make some kind of effort to at least jump to the next version. I know there wasn't a huge amount of people doing 1.13, but we'll at least get a momentary update up there, something that's functional, and then we'll try to go to the next version and we'll keep going. I know for sure when it comes to the last 2 versions that were released, it will be incredibly difficult to get ICBM updated, because they did redo a lot of the entity model and renders and stuff, And when you get something like ICBM it has a lot of that entity relationship on renders, especially something like a Redmatter here, it will prove to be a bit of a painful updating transition. But we will put some effort in there. It still could be months and months behind each major release of the game. Other than that, I don't have a huge amount of other plans or updates to really give. I'll try to keep videos coming with how we're doing. If you want to get something more current, you guys are always welcome to join the Discord and actually ask questions and poke me about what's going on or how we're planning on doing things. I tend to at least try to look at that a couple times a day and respond to what I see. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching, and yeah, we'll be back next time.